Plato's pupil Aristotle took a down-to-earth approach to philosophy. Consider Plato's doctrine of the ideal forms. For Plato, these are abstract objects existing in a world we cannot detect with our senses. Since these are the focus of study in philosophy, it follows that philosophy is really about ideas concerning a reality that lies beyond what we can see around us. Philosophy is concerned with a heavenly or transcendent realm. Aristotle, by contrast, preferred to concentrate on the world around him, the world of physical material things, rather than abstract ideas. The distinction between Plato and Aristotle is captured in the famous and beautiful Raphael picture School of Athens. Here we see Plato and Aristotle talking. Plato is pointing up to the heavens, whilst Aristotle points down to the ground. Aristotle was particularly impressed by the fact that things change. But what do we mean by that? The idea of a thing changing is problematic. Change means that we have the same thing, and yet at the same time something different. How is this possible? Well, Aristotle's theory proposed that things, or the term as he would call it was substances, should be thought of as combinations of matter and form. The matter is the stuff that makes things up. The form is the way that that stuff is organised. Over time, the matter changes. Your body, for example, contains a lot of matter which you didn't possess when you were born. But what remains the same is the form, the pattern or organisation of that material stuff. So although in material terms you are quite different from when you were born, you remain the same person by means of the persistence of your form, the pattern or organisation of the material that makes up your body. You only cease to exist at the point of death when this form or pattern breaks down and is destroyed. Aristotle wrote about more or less every topic that can be studied: logic, physics, biology, politics, ethics, geology, and more besides. He believed in doing philosophy by looking at the world around and learning from it. In this, Aristotle is closer to the empiricists, those philosophers who believe that knowledge comes from sense experience, rather than to a rationalist like Plato. So, for example, Aristotle believed that there are 4 fundamental forms of matter: earth, air, wind and fire. Each has its own characteristic natural tendency. Earth tends to fall towards the centre of the earth, fire tends to rise. Aristotle also thought that in the world beyond the moon, in the heavens, in the celestial sphere, there existed a 5th state of matter, the quintessence. This is what stars are made of, and they behave in quite a different way to matter on the earth. The stars orbit ceaselessly around the earth in circles. Aristotle's writings were enormously influential, but they were lost to the intellectual world during the early Middle Ages. They re-emerged during the 12th and 13th centuries. As they came to light again, their rediscovery prompted a reawakening within the world of philosophy. In the intervening years, when his work had been largely forgotten, the major intellectual development had been the rise of Christianity. This brought with it its own philosophy. The world was created by God. Mankind was made in God's image in order to worship him, but mankind had become sinful. God redeemed sinful humanity through the death of Christ on the cross, making it possible for us to go to heaven. You can see in that story that there are points of contact between Christianity and the teachings of Plato, which also emphasize a heavenly realm. And indeed many of the early Christians were called Neoplatonists. The idea of God as a being of changeless perfection, and the idea of the soul's journey away from the material world towards a heavenly perfect realm, these fit well with Platonistic and Christian ways of thinking. So when Aristotle's writings were rediscovered, they posed a serious problem for the Catholic Church, which by this time had largely conquered Europe.